Hello and welcome to Matters of Mind. My name is Thomas, and today we are going to be discussing Carl Jung's Answer to Job. Thanks for joining me today, and if you don't mind, please press the like and subscribe button. It's incredibly helpful for me. So we're going to dive right into it. So if you're not familiar with Carl Jung, Eric Neumann, who did Origins of Consciousness, some religious history, and really how to look at religion, this book can be a bit of a tough read. And Carl Jung does not go into the manner in which he views religion and mythology, etc. here. So it's best to come into it with a little bit of knowledge on how he and others like him tend to look at religion and mythology. And that's much more through a psychological lens, as in how does how does religion affect or reflect the psychology of mankind? Now, if you're not familiar with the book of Job, it's a book in the Bible that goes through quite a story. It's very much like a Platonic dialogue, so where you're like a fly on the wall sitting in on a conversation. And it's like God and Job having this discussion about the essence of morality and justice. So what happens, and I'll make it way too non-complicated, is that it's essentially like the devil making a bet with God, saying, hey, I bet I can make Job leave you, forget about you, deny you. And then God takes on that challenge because he knows how righteous a man that Job is. So what ends up happening is Job goes through tons and tons of different trials and tribulations, and we get to see what happens, and we hear the conversation between these entities as far as Job questioning what he's done wrong, if anything, and what, if any, justice he's ever going to receive. So I'll go over just a couple of main ideas and takeaways from this book. So one of the things that I got really interested in is the idea, or really the question, is God a moral being? Now, the way Jung approaches it is questioning whether God is actually a being in the sense that we are beings. So if you remember, and if you're familiar with the story of Moses, when he talks to the burning bush, which is God speaking to him about taking a message to the the Israelites while they're still in Egypt, Moses asks him what his name is. And God answers essentially saying he is being itself. I am, I always was, and I always will be. So being itself is what Jung describes as more like a phenomenon. Now, human beings being social creatures, we tend to anthropomorphize, which means we tend to take our own nature and project it onto other things that we have trouble describing. Now, God is something that's difficult to describe, so we tend to make a personality up as a means to describe God. So Jung questions whether or not God can be a moral being, because a moral being has to have choices. If you can't choose between right or wrong, good or bad, then you're not being moral. You're just existing. And because Jung sees God as a phenomenon as opposed to a being, it doesn't have any. He doesn't have any choice. So it's not that God is a moral being. What's happening is we're projecting our personalities onto him and experiencing this phenomenon and describing it in terms that make sense to us. I also think using that framework for understanding God or gods in general, even like the Greek gods, any gods of the past, is really helpful, because I don't think that ancient people thought of them necessarily as the way we think of them. You know, people say, oh, Sky Daddy or whatever. It's really a means to describe a phenomenon in the only manner that we're familiar with that can help to capture the ineffable, the undescribable, and the vastly complicated. Another really helpful thing is that Jung doesn't just focus on the book of Job. He takes these concepts that he's developing and asking about and really weaves them into other parts of the biblical narrative, all the way through Ezekiel, the story of Mary, etc., etc. And the reason that's helpful is because it helps us to realize that the framework with which he's saying the narrative in Job exists also exists throughout the rest of the biblical narrative. And it's not just random stories that people throw together in a book. There is a very specific cosmology that's consistent from Genesis, Exodus, all the way through the New Testament as well. So as far as recommending this book, it really did stretch my mind. And just reviewing the notes that I took with it took a long time because I found myself getting distracted by thinking about all of these things again and how deep and really transcendent they are. It's a great read. It really helped me to understand a lot of things outside of just the story of Job. So I definitely recommend it. It's only 100 pages. It's a pretty thin book, but I did find myself taking a lot longer because with Jung, especially when you're talking about ideas on the edge like this, it did take a lot of brain power. So I had to stop often and reread many things to make sure I was capturing or getting close to capturing the gist of what he was getting at here. So thanks again for joining. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the book, and I'm enjoying making these videos. If you haven't yet, please do like and subscribe. It's really helpful. I do appreciate. And if you have any comments, or if you read the book, please join me down in the comment section. I'd love to hear what you have to say and what you thought of the book. Have a great day. Goodbye.